Hello and welcome to Hollywood. We've come to the world-famous Universal Studios, who are behind 4 out of the 9 films nominated for Best Picture: Darkest Hour, Get Out, Lady Bird and Phantom Thread. We'll be finding out about them and all the major nominees in the next half an hour.
It just feels like there's something bigger to be said.
Everyone has their own truth.
It's amazing to see that the majority of the best films this year have female protagonists at the heart of them.
Very strong female leads. So that happened spontaneously.
It's perfect.
I love it.
What has happened in the last 3 or 4 months is an epic event.
A woman of such sort of integrity and rage and power.
You know who threw that can?
What can? Character, something, the sparks flying.
You cannot reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth!
It felt like, I've never really seen anything like this before. It felt truly creative because I don't know what would happen next.
It's prime and elemental in its simplicity, and that's why I think it's one of the great stories in human history.
This is the 90th Oscars, and over the years there have been tears, triumphs and total surprises. It's long been a platform for political sentiment, but this year something totally unprecedented has been happening, as our LA correspondent Greg Milam reports.
The post-Weinstein reckoning will be felt this weekend. Last year's winner for Best Actor, Casey Affleck, facing harassment allegations of his own, will not, as is tradition, present an award. And the Academy faces criticism over why it's expelled Weinstein, but not others, like convicted sex offender Roman Polanski, the man who took over as president 2 months before the Weinstein scandal broke.
Harvey Weinstein was like a seismic eruption. That particular situation had a gravity and a depth of misbehavior and conduct that was so evident it had to be addressed, and it was ongoing and immediate. In terms of Polanski, in terms of some other names that have come up, I mean, the reality is, yes, some of these people have won Oscars even. We'll just have to see, what happens as we move forward.
Over the last 6 months, we've learned a lot about the other side of Hollywood, behind the facade, the hidden world of dark secrets. And the change that's happening here as a result is also having an effect way beyond the entertainment industry, for people a long way from the spotlight.
Ai-jen Poo was Meryl Streep's guest at the Golden Globes, an activist for domestic workers. She says that message, that time's up across the board, is real.
The choice to include all of these different constituencies that were the kind of communities that were represented by activists at the Golden Globes, to me, was a very intentional choice to say the kind of movement we want to be a part of and build is one that is inclusive and that really does advance the interests and improve life for all women and all people.
But it will be about Hollywood this weekend, and a reminder that whatever is changing here, the people who make the movies spend millions on winning, because winning matters in Hollywood.
I'm now joined by Greg Milam and Melissa Silverstein from Women in Hollywood. Great to see you both. Melissa, how will the Time's Up campaign be reflected on the carpet and during the ceremony?
Well, I think the Time's Up campaign is reflecting in everything that's been going on in the industry. And so while we don't know what people will be saying on the carpet or at their interviews, I think it has overwhelmed the conversation, and also it's just pervasive in the industry now.
Greg, is there any indications about how the ceremony will be conducted? Has anyone said anything about that?
Well, we saw the president of the Academy, John Bailey, there talking about what's going on in the industry and this seismic shift, as he described it. I think they know it will be mentioned on the stage, certainly. They tread a very careful line in saying, well, who knows what people will say when they get up there to accept an award. But I think it would be very odd if it wasn't reflected in some of those speeches and perhaps in some of the questions, as Melissa says, on the red carpet and in the interview room, because it is such a big deal for the industry, and we've seen in all the other award shows something that can't be ignored.
Do you think the culture is changing, though? Do you think that things like the Time's Up campaign will give women the strength to come forward and just not put up with these types of things anymore?
Women just want to work. They want to work in a safe environment. They want to be successful. They want to have opportunities to get these jobs. This is really simple things. And by the way, sexual harassment has been illegal in this country for 30 years. This is not news that this has been going on. But now what is happening is people are paying attention to it in a much more significant way, and hopefully we're going to see better protections.
Thank you both so much. And now we have been speaking to a few of this year's nominees about how they see the future for women here in Hollywood.
I do think that, you know, if this visibility or if the idea of me as a role model helps to get more women behind the camera, then I'll do anything to make that happen. So I'm really honored to be in that position and hopefully pull more people out of the trenches.
Now everyone's making a conscious effort to have female storytellers tell those stories, and I think this year's such a strong year for films anyway, but it's amazing to see that the majority of the best films this year have female protagonists at the heart of them.
We're all still dressing up. We haven't stopped that, but there's less attention being put on, you know, what one person is wearing versus another. That whole thing of like who wore it best, and you know.
While the Best Picture frontrunners are female-led films, 3 take on historical men, as Greg Milam reports.
On board the famous old liner the Queen Mary, now a hotel in California, you find the sets for the movie of The Darkest Hour. Aboard a ship on which Churchill sailed 3 times during the war, you can examine up close the meticulous attention to detail of the movie makers in recreating the cabinet war rooms.
I invite you to take up the position of Prime Minister.
The man who plays Churchill may well pick up the Best Actor Oscar this year, a reward for his own transformation for the part.
We're in full retreat.
I'm nearly 60 and I thought I'm not going to gain 70 pounds. I spent the rest of my life actually losing weight. So we always knew that there would be some makeup. We found, I think, a nice balance.
There is another World War II epic in the running, of course, and the director of Dunkirk says filmmakers have a duty to be faithful to the facts.
You can't help but feel the responsibility to tell this story with respect to history. I started to feel that, knowing as I do the artifice that has to be applied to characters at the center of a story like this, to make the story clear to the audience, to give them the right information.
Of course, Hollywood is generally all about make-believe, and it does have a history of messing with, well, history. But with more and more biopics being made and films about real, historic, significant events, and with so much focus on whether we can believe what we're seeing on our screens, there is a responsibility on filmmakers to tell the truth.
Where we cannot reach them. They're pushing.
Whether any of this bothers the Academy judges, we'll soon find out. The betting, though, suggests this performance will bring Gary Oldman's acting career its finest hour.
Now we've moved location to the set of Psycho, which was nominated for 4 Oscars in 1961. Darkest Hour is up for 6, and I'm delighted to say I am joined by its producer, Lisa Bruce. Lisa, lovely to see you.
Good to see you.
Congratulations, 6 nominations. You must be so delighted.
Yeah, it's great. It's really exciting. I mean, the film has really been embraced by sort of a global audience, and that's the best part. And it's really an honor to be nominated for 6. Yeah.
What do you think it is about the film that struck such a chord with voters and audiences?
You know, it's interesting to make a movie that's set in 1940 but feels so relevant today, and I think a lot of that has to do with, you know, a need for us to sort of find a strong leader that is very clear on their vision and very articulate, and Winston Churchill was very clear in this one moment in his prime ministership as he stood up against Hitler, and I think that's just moves people.
And what were the challenges in doing a film that was based on real-life events?
Yeah, so we were involved quite a lot with the Churchill family, so we got details from them. The writer, Anthony McCartan, did a ton of research, and then we brought in researchers as well as historians. And then the art department, led by Sarah Greenwood, is one of the best in the world, really. And that's Joe Wright's team, Joe Wright, our director. And what they did was they got very, very detailed about not just the veracity of the sets, the details of the sets, but but human details from people's diaries and from people's stories and from talking to people that actually had been in the Churchill War Rooms. And we built the whole Churchill War Rooms, and then we also built the whole House of Commons, which was just amazing. And then Joe Wright, the way he works is he filled the House of Commons up not with, you know, we didn't do digital extras or we didn't do people against green screen. That was 500 extras, all dressed in period 1940, you know, all the way down to the underwear. So I think it makes everybody feel very, very much in that actual period, and then it evokes that, I think, to an audience.
And Gary Oldman, I mean, he is so sensational and presumably had to spend about 7 days in makeup to look like Churchill. I mean, he's so right on, isn't he?
I mean, it was months of research and tests with an amazing artist by the nickname of Kazoo, and he was at 3 hours every single day in hair and makeup, and then by the time he was in wardrobe, it's like 3.5, and every single day. And yeah, he doesn't look anything like Gary Oldman.
This year, the Oscars is very much focused on women, female-led films, and also women in the industry. As a female producer working in Hollywood, how does that feel?
I just got to say, it feels like it's about time. I mean, right, we're 50% of the population as women, and largely up until even a year ago, I would say most material is generated by men, it's governed by men, the funders are men, largely. And it's not that they have an agenda, but when you don't have females creating the material, creating the source, and then directing it and governing how that's made, you don't naturally have a female, you don't have a natural female voice that feels authentic. And I think both also for people of color, it's changing because there's more diversity in media, and I hope that will continue.
So Lisa, how positive are you about the future?
You know, it does honestly feel like for the first time in my career that it's actually changing, because I think people are now really looking at having material that is not just written by women, but also directed by women and produced by women. And I think that will bring a whole different level of storytelling. I mean, up till now, I feel like a lot of female characters are kind of ornamental. They're there because you're supposed to have a woman in the, you know, in the house or in the office, but they're not really written in a way that feels like a truthful representation. I think that's really changing.
And it's crazy because it makes good business sense. Half the population is going to the movies.
Yeah,
they're
totally
women.
makes good businesses. Exactly.
Hello and welcome back. You join us in Hollywood at Universal Studios, and this is the studio behind many of this year's Oscar-nominated films. Jaws, of course, won 3 Academy Awards in 1976, and its director Steven Spielberg is no stranger to the madness of award season. His film The Post is this year in the running for Best Picture. Set in the 70s, it focuses on the Washington Post's decision to publish the Pentagon Papers, secret documents about the Vietnam War, which exposed years of government deception.
It reminded me of things that are happening right now in terms of the media being broadsided by this administration and being labeled if they're not pleased with the coverage. News sources are being called fake, or fake news is a new kind of hashtag that's out there these days. And I found that, oh my God, when I read the script, I said, wow, Nixon did the same thing, but without a Twitter account.
The Post stars Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks, both giants in an industry currently reeling from allegations of sexual abuse and misconduct.
What has happened in the last 3 or 4 months is an epic event. This is not just another little blip on the news cycle. This is something that's not going to be yesterday's news in 24 hours from now. This is a watershed moment, and extolling the virtues of women coming forward through tremendous personal sacrifice, using tremendous amounts of courage to speak about what happened to them yesterday or 40 years ago. It doesn't matter.
Now to the films and who will win what. And I am joined by Hollywood reporters Stevie Wong and Amy Nicholson. Great to see you both.
Hello.
Now, starting with the directors, no nomination for Steven Spielberg.
No, who would have thought, here we are on the Jaws set, that Steven Spielberg is the underdog at this year's Oscar race in a film with Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep. I think to me it just shows how much the Oscars are changing and how fast.
I was also surprised that Martin McDonagh didn't get a nomination for 3 Billboards, because that's one of the favourites, isn't it?
My daughter Angela was murdered 7 months ago. It seems to me the police department is too busy torturing black folks and eating Krispy Kremes to solve actual crime.
But the fact that these two kind of frontrunners in other award ceremonies, they're not in the five, it allows us to have Greta Gerwig in the list now, and we also get Jordan Peele. And I know you're a huge fan of Greta Gerwig.
Only the fifth woman in history to be nominated as Best Director.
It's true. You know, I think that a lot of times Best Director goes to the person who looks like they did the most. They have the most costumes and explosions and military things. But the idea that they're recognizing somebody who just made a fantastic ensemble piece, who can direct actors that well, to me that's what we should be rewarding just as much as somebody who does something more showy.
Now the makeup of the Academy has changed in the last few years. Do you think that's had an effect on this year's nominations? Because on the surface it does seem to be more diverse.
It's extremely diverse now, much more so than maybe 2 years ago. And so the hashtag of Oscars so white, it still might play a little bit, but the fact that, you know, all the different categories that we're seeing differences, and that's a nice thing for us to kind of, you know, admire.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, in the last 2 years, the Academy added thousands, deliberately thousands of younger representatives, people of color, because if we were here 2 years ago, we would have said, oh, the Academy, it's a bunch of old white guys. Right. Now, I feel like, especially in categories like Best Director, you see these new members fighting to redefine what an Oscar film is.
Yeah, because we've got Mary J. Blige from Mudbound. Yes. She's a fantastic nominee. She's nominated in 2 categories. There's lots of history being made at this year's Oscars, isn't there?
I don't want you working for them. I won't be working for them. I'll be working for us.
You know, for her to be Best Supporting Actress, and also she's going to perform, hopefully, at the Oscars with her song from the film Mudbound. So
yeah, her performance in Mudbound is spectacular because she carries herself like a diva. I mean, this is a woman who is able to stand in front of stadiums and channel emotions with a microphone and a song. She does that here on a small scale. You know what her character in Mudbound is thinking, even when she's not acting in the most deliberate ways.
And talking about Brits, I think we have how many nominations? 24 for Brits this year. That's not too bad, is it? That's quite good.
That's solid. I mean, you're spread out in all the acting categories. I think you're very likely to win at least one. My bet is maybe Gary Oldman for Best Actor.
I agree.
What about Sally Hawkins? She is in Shape of Water, which leads the nominations at 13. Has she got a chance?
I don't think so. I mean, as much as I like her performance in that, I feel like, you know, Frances McDormand has really kind of won every single award, and it's going to be really difficult for her to not pick this one up. I think the odds are on her favor for sure.
They are, but I think Sally has a chance. I do think she has a chance. I would not be on the floor gasping in astonishment if she won. Because honestly, they're just knocked out that a woman who doesn't speak at all was able to do so much in that film.
3 Billboards, we can also claim it's a British film. It's made by British producers, isn't it? So we'll be gunning for that one as well.
Although I think that's counting the littlest bit against it all of a sudden, because the conversations you're hearing among voters is, who's this British guy to come in and make a movie explaining American racism to us? I think they're a little touchy about it. And I think that's the up-road hill that Martin McDonagh has to say. Like, I have a right to write about this. I have a perspective.
So who will get Best Picture? Because coming into this, 3 Billboards we thought was the favourite, but I mean, will it actually walk away with the Oscar?
I don't think so.
And
Why?
also, we have this, when we were talking about this, how you, in the nominee ballot, you can choose your top 3 films, or maybe even more. And so I feel that people who like 3 Billboards are going to put out number 1, but always the number 2 would be Shape of Water. And by default, everybody's number 2 and number 1. I think Shape's going to just pick up based on like the numbers that they're collecting from everybody else.
Massively splitting the vote. So actually, everyone's second choice, which is likely to be the Shape of Water, will walk away with the Oscar.
Like
That's fascinating, isn't it?
Last year, if you wanted to reward like an indie film that took a big risk, you were all going for Moonlight. This year, it's scattered. Nobody can decide.
Now from Hollyoaks to Hollywood, former soap star Rachel Shenton is Oscar nominated for her short film. Rachel, huge congratulations on your nomination. Now tell us, what was the inspiration for this film?
Yeah, my lovely dad lived the last 2 years of his life profoundly deaf. He lost his hearing very suddenly. So I saw firsthand the huge effects that has on a person and a family, and got involved with the deaf community, learned sign language, and kind of fell in love with it, really. The language itself is beautiful, and the deaf community are a real community of their own. And as I got more exposed to it, I saw the barriers that deaf children and deaf people face, the needless barriers, actually. And that gave me the impetus to write the script.
You're an actress, so how do you go from being a successful actress to writing an Oscar-nominated film?
I mean, I suppose it's just one of those things. I did and do probably, feel underqualified to write it, because I'd never written anything before and kind of had that they call it imposter syndrome, you know, like, oh, well, how can I do this? I've never done anything before. But I felt so passionately about the subject and that it's a story that needed to be told that I kind of thought, well, I'll just give it a go. It's my fiance, who's Chris Overton, the director of the project, who kind of really forced me to actually put pen to paper and write it. And he said, just send it to me, because if it's rubbish, nobody will ever see it, and you just delete it. So I did, yeah.
And when you found out you were nominated, I mean, what on earth was that like? So few people in the world will ever have that feeling.
It's so crazy. Even you just saying it then feels crazy. Like, it doesn't feel like it's even happening. So surreal. Such a surreal moment. And because short film, obviously, they're notoriously a labour of love. They're done on a shoestring. There's no financial gain from a short film. So it just feels like such a long process of and you never know if there's going to be any rewards, and you know, you don't do it for that reason at all. So when there are, and this happens, it's just extra special.
And it's very interesting for you to be here this year in particular, when there's so much of the spotlight is on women. Does it feel special?
Yeah, I think it kind of does. There were a lot of conversations that were just going on. I feel it's a good time for women right now. It's a good year for women. It's a good year for diversity, and I think it's actually really important to remember that disability falls in the diversity bracket as well. It's a community of people that are hugely underrepresented in film, so we're very proud that our movie represents that as well.
And don't forget, you can watch the Oscars ceremony live on Sky Cinema on Sunday night. And join me on Sky News with all the winners from the Vanity Fair party from 6 o'clock on Monday morning.